Good morning. Good morning. I am so happy to see you this morning. It's been a great conference so far, and we've just loved getting, to that end, can we just recognize the Hotel Kansas City for the accommodations, for the 12 p.m. checkout, and the willingness to do a little later, and for all their efforts at making us comfortable. It was definitely at the forefront of our minds. We wanted you to have a place that you could come that was a little bougie, a little comfy, just wanted you to feel celebrated for your roles, and someplace where you could feel really good. So I don't feel like they've let us down. They've done a good job. Let's go ahead and give them one more. So this morning's conversation about pay equity at financial institutions, I started this presentation the first time about 3 years ago. I remember it was 5 a.m. and I was in the Anchorage airport when I started doing my research. And I need to explain to you where I came from and how I have grown in my perspective about pay equity. With a mother who was a first-generation American from East Germany, Arbeit macht frei is a slogan that we used. And I just always thought that if you worked hard and pulled yourself up by your bootstraps and, you got a good education, and why do you do good in school? You want that GPA, and why do you want that GPA? So you can get a good job. And that I absolutely never seen anyone be discriminated in front of me. Like, I would have gotten that fight. But I'd never seen it. From a small town in Kansas, it didn't exist in my mind because I'd never seen it. And really, my closest friends were always people of color. And they taught me how to do the hustle, dun, 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 okay? They taught me how to act. I was just a little poor welfare girl. I didn't know anything. But I had friends who were people of color who've always been there for me. They've always been they taught me I could raise my hands in church. Some of my favorite parts of myself, they introduced me to. So the idea, and they were so educated, they always affirmed college, and it never ever entered my mind that anyone would have a reason or want to discriminate against somebody based on gender or based on color. It wasn't my experience. I was so glad as I've kind of worked through this presentation, I called up Bobby. He was the little brother of my friend. He's a very successful insurance guy in Atlanta. He's so successful. And I said, Bobby, I was in town and I took him to dinner. I said, Bobby, I never asked anyone this question, and I dare you to encourage you to ask someone, have you ever experienced discrimination? And he laughed right there, just belly laughed, and told me about Owen Hutchinson when they were hanging out on Main Street, how they were rowdy. The football players were out there, and the cops came, and he was the only one of that whole group that got wrestled down to the ground because the guys were being a little noisy. And if you just knew him, you just know he's nobody that would be. He's just a guy, So, he'd shared his story with me, and I thought that was so interesting. So this has been an evolution for me to really consider discrimination at all. And then even last night, as I woke up early in the morning and I was thinking about this topic, and I reminded myself, even when as a young person, I was an assistant branch manager at a Pizza Hut, exempt, come on, okay, right? Working literally 90 hours a week. And when my manager started harassing me, sexually harassing me, I took it as something you just like, oh, and you just get away as soon as possible. I didn't look at it like, this is discrimination, this is absolutely a violation, and this is wrong. Boy, if it only happened today, but, right? But I didn't even recognize that. I just thought it was something that you kind of maneuver around their feelings and get yourself to a safe place. I didn't know what it was I was looking at. Even when he finally said, you will have sex with me or you will lose your job. Even then, and I was just thinking about this last night, connecting these dots. Even then, and I reached out to his regional manager, and he was fired, and then his best friend came in to manage, and then I was fired about a month later, and then he was back. Even then, I didn't think, you know, this is abuse, and this is a crime against humanity, not just against me. And like, it was just something you put your head down and you go back to work and you find a better situation. So I'm sharing that with you because I'm standing up here to share information and data about pay equity, and I realize my own journey as I've looked at this, and how I realize how blind, how I don't see things because of my culture and where I grew up. And so I just want to share that with you, because I don't think in my 23-year career, other than one time, have I ever heard of out-and-out pay discrimination. Like, let's face it, you're from community banks and credit unions. You have statements on your web page that says, employer of choice, our employees are our greatest assets, and they're very nice people. Like, I don't think anyone gets up and says, oh yeah, that's me. I definitely am for pay discrimination, or, you know, no, I don't think we should pay a minority what we pay a non-minority. Like, no one would own that. And so as I was laying in my bed, I was thinking, well, first of all, do you think it happens? Raise your hand when we get to the data if you think that female executives are paid less than male executives. Oh, okay, all right. Well, what about at the CEO level? Do you think it's going to happen? What do you think I'm going to show you? Do female CEOs get paid less than male CEOs? Raise your hand if you believe that's true. Okay, a bit fewer, or you're already tired of raising your hands. Do you think it happens at the exempt level? Raise your hand if you think it happens. I'm not going to quit. I'm not quitting. This is that moment. Females and minorities are paid less at times at the exempt level. And I'm going to guess you would think it also exists. So I asked myself for the first time this morning, what are they telling themselves? Like, you are the chief of workplace excellence. And this is autopsy without blame, by the way. We want to look at this, and I just want you to lean in, press in, and take whatever you can from this. Like, what do people tell themselves? Like, even if there's even one case. I know they don't tell themselves, I'm a monster. I'm deliberately not paying people. I'm paying people less because they're a minority or gender. So what are they telling themselves to be okay with themselves? Let's talk about that. And I'm like, because they're reasonable, nice people. What do they tell themselves? I think they tell themselves they're not as good of a worker, because you can mask that a lot of different ways, right? I'm just asking for real reasons. What are some of the things, whether it's true or not, doesn't even matter, but what is it that they tell themselves to be okay with themselves?
I'm not even sure they tell themselves anything. It's just, it is what it is.
I think we have biases, right? We all have it. And I think it has to do with our environment and how we grew up, right? How we were raised by our parents, what their beliefs were, and then in our environment, I believe. So I grew up in Germany the first 20 years of my life, and honestly, when I came to America, first I noticed the big emphasis on black and white, and I'm like, what's the big deal? Because I did not experience that in Germany. But everything was like, well, this person is black, and this person is white because of that, and I'm like, I was really shocked about this, and it really stood out to me, you know? So, yeah, so I always was somewhat of a rebel.
Yeah.
I'm married out of my race.
Maybe they don't see it like I didn't see it. Maybe they just didn't see it because no one does it publicly. Like I doubt anybody said, and then the CEO walked into my office and told me to pay the minority less. Like that's probably never happened to anyone, right? So it's not a blatant thing because if it were blatant, you would be able to say, wait a minute, no, right? One thing I know about you, I know that when you went into human resources, you are socially just people, you wanted to develop people, you wanted to help people grow professionally, you wanted to help an organization be the best that it could be. That if you liked numbers, you would have went into finance where they're paid more, right? So, yeah. So I know that you're all about doing the right thing. Like I've never met a human resource professional that I didn't think so. Lori?
It could also be like perpetuating just bad decisions that have been made over time.
Give me an example.
So you get a couple of candidates, and because somebody else, had these opinions and paid maybe a man more than a woman, you're just trying to get them for what you can get them, or at least that's been, there's more strategy today.
The good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, the good deal is not the good deal. Thank you for that. Allison?
I think just in general, women also demand, so we don't speak up and ask for what our value is, so we tend to accept less because we don't want to be seen as problematic.
Yeah. When I grew up, the people that were for women's rights were burning their bras. I don't want to be a bra burner. Like, I'm a real business person. Take me serious, right? So they were what I didn't want to be. Like, you said feminist, and I definitely was like, whatever that is, I'm not, because I'm not burning my bra, not my coal. But, Patty?
Well, I think we all grow up with like going to the good old boy network or watching Baby Boomer and seeing a woman who was an executive not being true to the same. She was good with her family, she was working hard, watching things like that growing up. I think we as, I'm just going to speak for myself, me as a woman was like, I don't want to be treated like that. I have to work twice as hard, I have to push twice as much, and I have to, those things stuck in my mind as growing up watching different movies and seeing, there truly are middle going networks.
Isn't it like that a little bit with HR? You might be the only woman on the senior management team. Do you ever get a sense of, if you were to speak up about something like that, a lack of receptivity, or that you're having to buck the good old boy? Now you're one of those people that are causing problems. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dolly?
So people will also try to subconsciously hire people who look or act like that, and then it falls into promotions so that at higher levels they see fewer women and minorities at higher levels. So there's not people to model your behavior, and then it will project it on interviewees more than it's actually there. So if I see somebody who looks like me, of course they're a good person, or oh, I can't hire her or promote her because she has kids, so she has to marry somebody, or subconsciously.
I really believe that the most recent research, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, because I never mind that men are taking as much time off to take care of the kids as women, that is a shared responsibility typically. Is that true or not? Yeah, I know, and I just know from my experience, but you have a broader experience than me, and I would expect that's true. Does anyone else have something they want to comment on about How can it happen? What do they tell themselves to make it okay?
I've had a manager tell me before that, well, he needs to be paid more because he has a family to support.
Could you say that out loud?
I had a manager before say they be making more money because they have a family to support.
Yeah, that's not a good reason to get a salary increase ever, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Rachel?
I may be one of the exceptions in the room, but I used to work for a gentleman who used to be a prominent cardiologist, and you probably know who that is. And he actually told me that he wanted me to pay black women less than white women in the practice.
And you mention it because it is an outlier.
It is an outlier, but this has just been since 2000.
I know.
This is not, you know, I mean, it's still.
Not to say there aren't assholes, but. Yeah, but he would be an outlier. The one example, this is something I want you to be careful of. The one example that was a shocker, because it was just about 2 years ago, and it was about a $10 billion bank in Texas. And we were grading these jobs. I was grading the jobs, and this very nice man came in. And he sat down, and we were grading the job of an appraisal. And this man was an appraiser of commercial real estate, and this woman was an appraiser. And the only difference was he had a certificate from, 10 years ago, and she actually agreed not to get certified because that allowed her to do more things for the bank than he could do. And for that reason, there was a $3,000 a month difference in their compensation. Now, that is a lifestyle difference. And he said they do the same thing. And he was so nice about it. It's like he didn't even register what he was saying. And that the job duties were the same, the experience that was needed was the same. She had been off about 5 years ago for maternity leave, but had a lot of experience before that, and since then should definitely have been at least at midpoint. And what they did was they set up an appraiser 1 at 1 grade to justify what they were paying, and an appraiser 2 at the other grade to justify what they were paying the man. And when he left the room, I turned to the HR VP who was in there. She was one of those that had been with the company for 20 years and probably started as a teller and worked her way up into HR. She was very knowledgeable. I'm not taking that away from her. But I said, Marie, did you just hear what he said? And I went through it all again. And she said, oh, honey, I'm sure he didn't mean it the way it sounded. I felt like I'd fallen back into the Twilight Zone in the 1950s or something. It's like, what is going on here? And I did write that up in my overview report, and they still decided to do what they wanted to do. What do you think they told themselves? They told themselves it was okay. I don't know what the rationale would have been. So, well.
I think when we feel like that's all, not necessarily specifically, but in my institution, we had a previous CEO, our CFO was being paid, I'm telling you, like, probably $50,000 less than she should have made as a CEO. And she just kept hanging on because she knew it was kind of a vendetta against her.
What was her role?
CFO. But he wouldn't even give her the CFO title. He would give her like comptroller, whatever the title is. But she was doing the CFO duties, and then when our new CEO came on, and I moved into HR, I'm like, there's a huge discrepancy. And she knew. She was like, I was pregnant and young and trying to make a name, and I just moved. It's so sad.
Yeah. And it happens to CEOs all the time too. Not even just against women, but a lot of times if they've been there for a while, they're from around here, they're not going anywhere. And my favorite, and besides they're going to retire in 5 years, is utilized to justify. Then when they hire a new person, they end up paying more than the person that just helped them raise their assets by $100 million over the past decade or however long it took. So yes, it still exists, and it's our jobs to squash it. I can't think of even one incident where it's acceptable. And this is probably my third version of this presentation, and the more that I study and the more self-work that I do, I become more aware of how there's a tendency to want to apologize or okay, like we even call it pay disparity. That's such a nice word. It's such a nice word. It's abuse. It's treating someone less than what they should and justifying it. It impacts their lives. It impacts their families' lives. It impacts their retirement. And we just dress it up. So I'm still in the process. So you know how when you're processing something, you kind of maybe feel a little too passionately. I don't think I am. I'm still fighting it. Can you tell? It's like I'm bipolar on this thing. It's like, no, I'm done being nice about that. Yeah.
Christie, what about also HR and marketing? We have sort of, we're not the revenue generating piece of the organization. And I think often that we're not quite as important.
I think that if your midpoints are connected to the market, as long as you're being paid competitive, it's going to be up to you to pull up that seat and make them see that you are a business partner. You have to continue to work in those environments. You have to continue to prove, and you can do yourselves a big justice. I loved what Jared said the other day about going to ALCO committee. And I'm disappointed in the number of HR professionals that I ask what your ROA is and you don't know it, and what your capital ratio is and you don't know it. And then you say, why don't I have a seat at the table? So you have every right to demand competitive market pay. That's one topic. The other one is making clear, we all have the responsibility. I see you, Dolly, and I won't forget you. We all have the responsibility of making sure that our firms understand the value that we contribute. There's only one person who can get that job done. It's on your job description.
Years ago, I'm a government journalist, so I had done an article on HR's value in the organization, and one of the VPs of HR of a large company in the Jacksonville, Florida area had done an analysis because her CEO wasn't going to justify her pay, and she went through and she looked at every law that was they were responsible, every responsibility. And she said, if you turn this over to the manager, what's the likelihood of this manager making this mistake here? And she made it realistic, so it wasn't like every manager's going to make that mistake all the time. And she did a financial calculation that blew his mind. And I wrote that article. So every time you guys do a decision, you are protecting, you are making that company money by not burning fire, setting fire to that cash. So that talks to all y'all.
Yeah.
I think HR has the highest risk, right? If you think about some of the lawsuits that we often prevent, right, could be millions.
And the biggest operational budget, and watch them make any money without the people you hire. So I do think that the world has come a long ways to recognizing the value of HR. I've learned so much about you guys. I thought I've been in this for 23 years, and I'm so glad that we've had FinComp because I've had real conversations with you this week, and I've heard from people who have employees who want to commit suicide in their office, have their siblings or their children are on suicide. You have employees that come in beat up from spousal abuse. I mean, it's so much more than recruiting and policy manuals and getting the salaries right and then training and development. I mean, like, I knew coming in, I'm like, these people have to be so tired after COVID, and people were scared, and then the remote work, and then the great resignation, and then rising salaries with inflation, and all the things you dealt with. I was aware of that, but the things that have meant the most to me in these past 3 days has been hearing about the things, someone's overdrawn in their account, and, instead of just judging them and poo-pooing them, you get with them and you talk with them and you help them and you make them accountable and help them take the next step in their growth in that area. And I had no idea you had to do all that. You have to and that is why on that first day I had several people, and it broke my heart, who said, Christie, I am done. I am done, done, done. I can give until I'm empty and there's nothing left for me and it's still not enough. And it's exhausting. And I was so glad that you were here at FinComp, because you do need to fill up your own cup. You do need to take care of yourselves. I'm glad you're getting new information here, but I hope it's been a bit of a respite. And as you've poured into each other's cup, I hope you walk away feeling a little fuller. Well, let me get on with this data, and thank you for letting me just share with you, my journey as I've looked at this stuff and thought about this stuff and realized that no matter what the statistics are, even one is too much. When is that? I found myself saying, God, the data's better than it was a year ago. It was and? That's good, but, Now, some people would say that it has been said that men typically pick careers with higher paying salaries, like female engineers, like engineers, analysts, scientists, and doctors. And women tend to go into lower paying careers like female analysts, female engineers, female doctors. I thought that was a good one. Where do we get this data? Please take this into perspective. This is the data from the best of the best, because this is data pulled from payroll systems of our 300 clients as they've updated. You don't hire a compensation consultant because you don't care what the market is and you don't care how you pay people, right? So if it exists here, can you imagine what it's like out there? Because these are the best of the best. So we've taken data from 300 clients across, well, it's really more like 48 states. If you know anyone in West Virginia or South Dakota, come see me. I'm looking for clients there, so we can say in 50 states. In nearly 45,000 total employees, 300 CEOs, your industry as 2/3 women, 1/3 male, all right? 20 non-binary, which makes up really, I just put that in perspective, 0.6 of 1% identifies as transgender. So this is only a sampling. This data is only a sampling, but it's a darn good sampling and one that we should take a look at. In 2022, women earned 17% less than men on average. 39% of U.S. women over age 25. Actually, what is the key to making money? Wasn't it that college degree? Isn't that why we work so hard to get that college degree so we could get that good job? I was shocked that 39% of U.S. women over 25 hold a degree, about 2% more than U.S. men that hold a college degree. And when you take a look at this, what African American women are making $64 per dollar, Latinos are making 55 cents on the dollar. Asian women, 1.01 to 1, and then non-Hispanic, white non-Hispanic men are 79 to 1. So, and over a 20-year-old woman's lifetime, that's a $407,000 over a 40-year career compared to her counterpart. That's huge, right? Peer groups that we used, you can see for banks what the peer groups were, and you can see for credit unions what the peer groups were, so let's dig in. As it related to CEO pay, one out of eight of the bank asset peer groups, only 1 out of 8, the females CEOs are paid less. In credit unions, it was 3 out of 8, the females were paid less. And only 3 out of 8 bank assets even reported a minority as a CEO. And in every single case, it was lower than the non-minority. But sometimes as we look at this data, notice the absence of anyone in the role to collect the data from. All right, so as we take a look at gender here, the yellow bar is where the female average compa ratio is less than what the male average compa ratio is. And you also see what percentage of them, CEOs, there was only one category where there was a female CEO, and of course they were less. And then looking at the all, that's very interesting too, when you take a look at the all, the female average versus the male average. Credit unions hire more CEOs as more women as CEOs, and they pay them a little bit, they're still paid lower in the range. Yeah. That's common all the way up, until they get to the larger asset size. Finally, at 2 to 4 billion, the females start to be paid about the same or slightly more. Only 3 out of 8 bank asset size reported any minority as a CEO, and in every case, the average compa ratio was lower than the non-minority. Is this making you feel bad? I don't want you to feel bad, I just want you to take the information in, all right? For the banks in the 400 to 600 million, you can see that the non-minority is actually paid higher, and then also where there was a minority, and then in the 2 to 4, it was paid higher as well. But look at the percentages there on what percent. You can't, because way back in the room you can't see this slide, and these numbers are super tiny. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to turn my head like this so that we can kind of cover some of the data. I want to take a minute and look at this, because when you're on stage, you get nervous sometimes, and then you can skip by it to get on to the next slide, and I don't want to do that. Looking at the credit unions on CEO, you can see on the percentage of employees that are minority, in the 100 to 200, there was like 9.1%. 200 to 400 was 20.8% had minority CEOs. The same in the 400 to 600. Pretty much the same in the 1 to 2 billion. And then there was 25%. So you guys, the credit unions are much more are progressive about hiring CEOs that are minorities. And their overall non-minority compa ratio is 95.30 versus, that's the non-minority. The minority is 91.27. And someone might say, well, come on, that's only 4% difference. Do you realize that in most years, the average midpoint movement has been 2% from the year 2000 to the year 2018? I know we're seeing big midpoint movements now of 3.5 and 3.0, but that 4% could be 2 years of salary increases. Are you okay with being paid 2 years behind? I'm not. I wouldn't think that you would either, for as hard as that you work. So that's what you'd want to take a look at. So, you know, good for the credit unions on that one. I'm proud of you, and we'll want to continue. You can see that in for banks, only 8.3% even had a minority. The compa ratio was lower. That's not a big subset, so, but that's not the direction you want the data to go in. And also at the in the 1 to 2 billion, 21% had minority CEOs, and they were paid higher in the range, closer to their midpoints than the non-minorities. So, and these numbers are dramatically better. So even at the CEO level, if it happens at the CEO level, you know it's probably happening less than that. On the executive pay, let's take a look at gender. This is the percentage of employees that are executives that are female, And overall, just about 65% of banks have a female executive. And overall, they're paid not too differently at the bank level. So that's good. Over in this column, you'll see the difference. Like only at the 1 to 200, when there's a 10% difference between how they're paid, 60% of them have executives that are female, but there's an average of almost 10% difference in how they're paid. That stands out. And then, so just looking at this for you to see what I want to point out there. So they are hiring, that's a good percentage of employees. Oh, excuse me, this is on the stage looking at all this data. I'm sorry, 60% hire males. The percentage of females are more like 35% female, 65% male, with about a 4.8 difference in their compa ratio. At the credit unions, almost 43% are female executives, and their overall compa ratio is just about 2% difference. I just did the yellow anytime female was different than the male, so that you can, since I know you're sitting in the back of the room, conclude that the yellow means that the females are paid less as a percentage of their midpoint. Wow. Do I need to say anything else? Yeah, so exempt. Now, take this away. If I look at the all, 57.5% of the data showed exempt females, and they're all yellow. So 57.5% of the people in this group were female exempts, and they're all, the overall is that they're paid less than the male. Sometimes not a lot. And also, you have to take into consideration, we don't have their average date and position on here. For the CEOs, you have to take that very serious because their average tenure was 9 years. Okay, their average tenure was 9 years. So at the credit unions, 65% of the exempt were females, and you can see that all of them are in yellow. So they're all paid less as a percentage of their, I just don't think it's likely that all of them, all the females had less tenure or were lower performers. I think that that's a pretty easy conclusion to come to. Things get better in the non-exempt, and especially, I will say 2022 was the year of the corrective action. You know that the average employee who left for money got about a 16.1% salary increase, well within the 40% spread. They didn't have to go to a different range. They just had to be paid competitive in their own range. But I think the fear of losing people, suddenly organizations became very open to corrective actions, things that you've been telling them for years. About 3/4 of you did 2 corrective actions, 2 salary increases last year. So I think that helped take care of a lot because they were just afraid of losing people. But it had to hurt bad before they did that, because I've been saying for 20 years, if you're at the midpoint, if you're non-exempt and you've got 3 years in your job, what should your compa ratio be? What if you're black? Thank you. What if you're female? What if you're non-binary? And that is the beauty of using a system like BalancedComp, because I don't care if they're polka dotted, if they have tattoos, if they have color in their hair, if they're doing their job and they're an average performer and they're non-exempt, they should be at their midpoint, because the market would be delighted to take them away from you and only have to pay the 50th percentile to do so after you've trained them on your organization's dime for 3 years. And exempt, how long does it take you to get to your midpoint? Oh my God, what a great group. That's right. That's great. Because the market would be delighted to pay them the midpoint after you've trained them for 5 years. And they know your culture, and they know your systems, and they know your clients by name, and you're going to let someone just cart them off to a new organization for a 16% increase when you have a 40% spread to take care of that. And I know it feels like everyone runs to your door with a complaint, but no, a lot of them will just go to Indeed or Monster Board, and they'll just go find that job. And those that do come back to you and say, I'd love to stay if you want to meet this offer, the average is they're there for about another 18 months, and then they leave. So just proactively doing the right thing is always in life, always the best thing to do. Don't make it hurt. This year, you've got a problem. You've got a problem because of the interest rate risk environment and how squeezed they are feeling on their margins. You have CECL, you have inflation, but you still have a 3.6% unemployment rate, and the pain's not going away. They just don't have their highest net income year to, like they did last year, to take care of those things. So you've got some serious educating and diplomacy and getting them on the same page in order to make sure that you are not in increased exposure of losing people. So credit unions hire more minorities in the CEO, executive, exempt and non-exempt classifications than community banks. I always take a look when I have a new client, I take a look at Sterling's best places and look at what the percentage is in the general market at large, because it could be, maybe they are in rural Iowa or in the mountains in Colorado, and maybe they just don't have any people of color. Maybe that's an issue. That could be. But when you look at the general population and you see that it's 45% and you've got 20% in your employee base, you know, and it also shows you what percentage have college degrees, then that might be indicative of a better research, a better recruiting strategy. Minority credit union execs were paid less than non-minorities in 4 out of 6 asset groups. Banks hire less minorities in every job classification, but there wasn't as much pay disparity when they did have them, although, and this was a complete turnaround from 2 years ago. So they do hire less, but they did seem to have less disparate pay. So this is the percentage of US adults over 25 that have a bachelor's degree. 40% non-Hispanic whites, 28% for blacks, 59% for Asians, 20% for Hispanics. And I'm a business person at heart, I really am. When I think that almost 20% of US small businesses are owned by minorities, I think you want people that look and sound like them to call on them. I think there's a good business rationale, even if it's not just a social justice right thing to do, you've got to make the business case on why you need to, why you should be concerned about that. And that's in the US. There are pockets that's going to be much greater, so you have an even better business case for that. Let's look at executive minority pay. So I kind of gave you the answers already, and now we're looking at the data. Wow. Well, I was just looking at the percentage of employees that are minorities. In the 400 to 600, for a bank, it was 8.51, 600 to a billion, 6.82, 1 to 2, 10%. This is not a lot of executives that are minorities. And then we have the minority and non-minority compa ratio. So they're good, they're not good. That's a 5% difference. This is a 12% difference in the 2 to 4 billion. That's only 5 years difference in pay. They're good, and then as a group, there's, when you look at all, there's that. So hiring fewer executives, fewer problems, credit unions hiring more, like, wow, 22%, 16%. I don't know who this data point was, but it said 92.7% were minority in the 2 to 400, 6.9 in the smaller. So overall, 26.9% executives in credit unions compared to 7.3% in banks. And then the minority compa ratio overall was 88.6 compared to non-minority of 94.3. So about a quick 6% difference, only about 3 years difference in pay. It doesn't set well, does it? It doesn't set well. I'm starting to feel empathy, like, oh my God, are they going to be mad? That's my sick side that's still broken, that's worried about whether you're mad about this, because this is the truth. And then on the exempt, I think we already covered this. There was only one classification where the minorities, 600 million to $1 billion, one asset size where they were not paid less as a group. And then overall, at the exempt level, there's just about not enough that anyone would say anything, and it could be explained by performance, and it could be explained by tenure. I don't know. The intent of this is for you to go back and look, okay? At the credit union side, 28.9% are minority, and even though they are paid, this is 95.5, which I would not have thought was terrible. It's not that much under the market, but it's still a clear 6% difference, almost 7% difference between the non-minority. So something to think about there. Non-minority, non-exempt minority is what I meant to say. Non-exempt minority. So at a bank, it was 16.1% of the population was a minority. And again, they're paid about 2.5%. So not a tremendous difference. At a credit union, though, 34.3% are higher of all non-exempt in this sample group were minorities, and they're paid almost the same at the non-exempt level. So I'm just sorry, I'm just going to give it up for the credit unions here on this one, guys. I don't want to make anyone feel bad, but I think we can all celebrate that. Whether you work at a bank or a credit union, you can celebrate that. You like to see other people do well. About 68% of Democratic women and 50% of Republican women say that the pay gap is due to employers treating men and women differently. What do you think? We kind of talked a little bit about that, what that's due from. I will say 2022 was a fabulous correction year. I was so happy about it. I was recommending corrective actions. We were doing corrective labor budgets, getting them approved. Did all of you how many of you did a second increased salaries twice last year? Did you raise them high so I can see you? Yeah, okay, all right, you're out there. All right, so the ability to proactively identify pay disparity and autocorrect is absolutely critical for your position. And we have helped you with that because there is a minority pay report and a gender and minority pay report in BalancedComp. You can do it by two. You can look at gender and minority at the same time. You can look at it by job classification and minority. You can look at it by job classification and female. I want to tell you an interesting story. Rachel did a project recently, and it was at a bank, and after each project, we meet with the executive team, and we explain everything. And when she came to the part of a report, so this was only the second time I heard something that was blatant and alarming. She got ready to explain. The CEO it was a Zoom meeting, and his executive team was there, and she was getting ready to explain the gender and minority, and he said, "Stop! We will not be covering this." Yeah, I was a little shocked by that too. Then when I heard Helen talk yesterday, I thought, okay, maybe it was because whatever was about to come out of her mouth was discoverable. And so he didn't, that was the first time I'm like, was it because he's a blatant racist, or was it because he didn't want her to say something that might be discoverable later on if there was a problem and he didn't know what it would be? So I kind of almost gave, not a pass, but gave him maybe he wasn't a total asshole. Being wrong, making mistakes in this area means unnecessary turnover. And I want to say that I absolutely am convinced, and the research shows that non-minority employees are just as upset about seeing their colleagues be discriminated against. Maybe not just as. Let me just calm that word down a little bit. But they definitely are very concerned. They don't want to work for an environment that's not treating everyone. They're very socially conscious. It is not acceptable to them just because it's not hitting them in the paycheck. It will lead to increased turnover. All right? So being wrong means unnecessary turnover and not getting the best talent in a very tight labor market. Your strategies, your customer service, and your bottom line are going to be marginalized to the degree that we're unable to address the issue. And I do think that using an outside expert, sometimes that's why it's best to have an outside expert talk to your board about CEO comp. You work for the person. They can't think you're totally objective. And sometimes on topics like this, it may behoove you to have an outside person speak to your team about this. All right. I know we are, it's a heavy subject. It was heavy for me. I really was awake probably from 4 o'clock on just thinking about this topic because it's so important. And I have in front of me about 65 chiefs of workplace excellence. And you can't have an excellent workplace without addressing this. Data is important, but getting to the why. Why are they okay with it? How do they, because most people have to feel good about themselves. Looking at your performance review for bias in there. You know, I want to share with you, I've been fired 5 times in my life. Probably no surprise to some of you. And I say that, maybe as a young person, I think my emotional IQ was pretty low. I thought my opinions needed to be heard and understood. I was just a junior consultant in training, right? And drove managers probably crazy. But I say that because I think that Dolly said it. People who talk like us, look like us. So what is it, you know, and change agents make people uncomfortable. You can't make change. You don't come in and change things and people, they just surprisingly don't fall to their knees and thank you for enlightening them. It's uncomfortable. So I'm wondering also about the performance review and how objective yours are and if it's been looked at, because if someone makes me uncomfortable, maybe I rate them lower as a team player, teamwork. I didn't like how he spoke in that last meeting. It made me uncomfortable. He usurped my authority, came against my idea, and it made me very uncomfortable. So I rate him down on teamwork or something along those lines. So I think you have the ability to go in and take a look at the criteria you're using for measuring performance. It is perfectly fine to discriminate on pay based on performance, based on skill set, based on the net results. And you should not apologize for it, and you should be very avid about doing it. Pay for performance, right? But you do want to make sure if your performance review is a part of that, that you are, that you've looked at that and that, I mean, because we don't, if I didn't have 3 different times that I've spoken on this, I wouldn't have done 3 different self-evaluations and really challenged my thinking and think back to how I grew up and what were some of the things that maybe led me to look at things a certain way. I wouldn't have had a reason to. I'm in Kansas. No one's burning any buildings around here. There's not like a mass media issue. So I had an opportunity, but your managers might not have that opportunity either. And I think that when we do talk to people about this, coming at it with the, you're a racist, you're a bigot, that is the absolute wrong way to have that conversation because now we put people in boxes and they can't hear you. It doesn't matter if you're right. They can't hear you because you've just alienated them. So that's not a good thing. That's the wrong approach. But being able to dialogue with them and talk about these things so that they can kind of self-evolve and kind of become aware of maybe their own thinking on that, and then having the data to prove what the market is based on how much experience, what their comp ratio should be. I think that we intend to help you to be able to have these kind of dialogues, to have a more equitable workplace, because our goal for you is that you have the least amount of turnover, you don't have unnecessary turnover, and that you have an engaged workforce. So, any questions? Any comments or observations? I'd love to hear from some of the minorities in the room. If you don't mind sharing, you're in a safe spot. It's just us little HR people. Sonia, can I call on you? Okay. All right.
Because when you said that, I was like, wow, good.
Okay. You can respectfully decline. 100% I respect that. Sir?
I think oftentimes there's a fear of going against that cultural component that's been ingrained for so many years. So there is a sense that, okay, you don't want to rock the boat. So
Yeah.
and if you do that, you're fearful of what the implications.
Yeah. I didn't want to be a bra burner. I'm not one of those crazy people out there on the news. I don't want to be one of them, right? I want to be taken serious. Yeah. How do you overcome that?
I think it's a matter of relationships and really making sure that they respect your opinion and that it's unbiased. You have to understand that in my role, I have to present everything, the good, bad, the ugly.
Right.
And I'm presenting this with data and support.
Yeah.
So hopefully, coming from that perspective, they'll understand that there's more of a science and an art behind it, as
Yeah.
opposed to this just being a personal issue.
Yeah. I think what was your name? Kent. Oh, yeah, okay, great. Where are you from?
Texas.
Okay, very good. I think that's right. And I think saying to your executive or your CEO, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. And then state what your role is. And state your motivation behind the dialogue is to be a better business partner to them because you want to help them achieve their goals, their strategies, their net income. You really want to have the least amount of turnover because you understand that hiring and training people is very important. So setting that conversation, that this is a difficult conversation to have. I think that premise so that you're not adversarial in it, and then explaining that you've seen something that's troublesome to you, and if you already come with using Budget Builder to calculate what the corrective action is, so don't come in there with just the philosophy, you've got to come in there with the numbers and already have it calculated, what is the ask. In every sales pitch, and this is just transferring one idea to another person, you've got to know what the ask is. And I was speaking at the Bank Directors Conference, a similar presentation about 2 years ago, and I had a board member ask in front of a room of 300 people, this is how innocuous it is, how unaware people are. He stood up and he said, well, if you become aware of an issue, you know, when do you think you should take care of that? I said, well, I think it's the law, so now is good. You know, so, right? But genuinely nice person, totally unaware, and if I came, let me tell you, shame is not your friend when you have a difficult conversation. Shame will never get you. You might as well just say, I lose the conversation and walk off before you go there, because you will never get what you want if you come with shame. But if you come with data and you you kind of behind the table with them like Alex Dorr did, kind of standing back with them emotionally on the same side of the table to address it, you have a good chance of making a difference. And making a difference is what each one of you are all about. Ma'am?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's really important that we put the data out there and that we are all encouraged to go and have this ISBA conversation, because I've been a part of those ISBA conversations before, and I've 20 years of doing HR. The one thing that just makes my job get floor is every time I hear an executive or anyone in the organization who says, well, this isn't really a problem because nobody talks about the compensation. It's all confidential. I can't believe that people believe that, because this data is so important to be able to go back and do that.
Yeah. I would take them directly to the front of your website where integrity is one of your core values. Ma'am, are you standing here because I have 5 minutes? Oh, okay. Okay, okay.
I was gonna ask, I know you said, I think you have 16 people in your organization.
Yes, I do.
And I don't know how many clients you have.
300.
300 clients.
So that, when you guys sit and you look at the data on each of these companies, do you ever like call the CEO of those companies or reach out to any of them and say, you know, hey, we're looking at the data on the, and you, like your people not even up to midpoint, or, you know, or I see your minorities are paid low. Do y'all ever do that?
There are several times that we do that. One of them is after a new implementation when we write our overview report, and we are often asked to, not only do we submit the report, but it's up to the client, but they're asked to speak to them and review the report with both them and with the board. The other time that happens is if we do a recalibration project, and like every 3 years you should be recalibrating from top to bottom, and then you get another report like that where we've done the analysis. And then, but some people take that report and you never hear back, and others take it further and say, would you meet with my executive team and review these findings and give them, because I want to be in front of them. I don't want you to be explaining my data. I don't want to put you in between me and them. I mean, I want to be behind you every other time, but at that time, I want to be forefront and answering that, taking the hard questions and answering it. You need an outsider sometimes to be able to take that and that to be able to speak that. So we do that. Then upon request. It's very rarely requested, right? Yeah, it's very rarely requested outside of that. But see your favorite consultant. Thank you for asking that. Any other questions? Oh, you guys have such a tough job. I do not envy you. I have more respect for you than I have ever had in my whole life. On top of dealing with all the things we've talked about, then to say also, if your organization has pay disparity, only you are the chief of workplace excellence. The CFO is not the chief of workplace excellence. He does not know what a total reward proposition is. He does not deal with the things that you deal with. You have a huge calling on your life. You have a huge, well, that's all I can say, a calling on your life to do the right thing by so many people, and you do a wonderful job, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you.